Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalatu wassalamu ala rasulih nabil kareem wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajmain. I think Brother Hassan, you have already done the introduction. So I would like to welcome Brother Yusuf Sultan and brother and all of you to this. I think this is maybe first of this webinar on this standard. We have not heard of any other webinar or any other event so far on this. So we are happy and pleased to actually announce this. And I wanted to announce a few other things, but I would like to keep them for now. I would rather let you just advise that one thing I will announce definitely, that inshallah in very soon we are organizing, like we have been doing for the previous attempts of CSA exam. Brother Yusuf Sultan has been taking revision sessions. So he has, although these days, mashallah, he is, because of his new assignment in which we wish him and his team all success, which is Adal Advisory, which is doing like all sorts of Sharia advisory work. Although he's extremely busy those days in the establishment and other work for that organization, but he has very kindly accepted to do the session as we used to do. So very soon you will be hearing announcement with the date and other details. Brother Yusuf, thank you very much once again. The mic is yours. Bismillah.
Thank you very much, Brother Zia and Brother Ahsan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Muhammadin Sayyid al-Mursaleen wa ala alihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. As Brother Zia and Brother Ahsan has mentioned, this probably is one of the first few webinars on the new Sharia standard number 61 on payment cards. And it hasn't been yet translated officially in English by AAOIFI, but we will try to cover it, inshallah, in a brief manner, so that at least the overall understanding of the Sharia standard is clear to the participants, inshallah. So without further ado, let me share the presentation, inshallah. Okay, I hope the slide is visible to all of you.
Yes, sir, it's visible.
All right, thank you so much for your confirmation. Okay, so just a brief overview of this Sharia standard. We know that AAOIFI already has a Sharia standard on debit cards and charge cards and credit cards, which was basically issued on 2000. So if you look at the timeline of issuance, basically in the year 1999, Shari'ah Board of AAOIFI decides to issue a Sharia standard on debit cards and credit cards. And in the following year, Sharia standard number 2 in AAOIFI on debit cards and credit cards was issued. As you know, the first Sharia standard is on currencies. All right, so in the year 2005, when we have a lot of different types of cards, there was another assignment by the Shari'ah Board, basically to further research on the different applications of credit cards, but it was further postponed basically in 2007 based on another Shari'ah Board decision. And finally, all the way in 2021, just last year, we see a new Sharia standard was issued on payment card by the consensus of Sharia Board members in some clauses and by agreement of majority in other clauses. So the difference with this on this Sharia standard with many others is basically you will see in AAOIFI Sharia standards, usually in Arabic, they would mention al-mi'yar al-mu'addal, or in the English version, they would mention basically revised standard. But in this case, since the revisions are quite major, so the decision was basically to issue completely new Sharia standard in the title of Bitaqat al-Daf'i, or payment cards. Right, so we'll go through the very quick helicopter view of this Sharia standard. But for those who want to know details, definitely the Arabic version is the only source for now. and perhaps you might have to wait until the official English translation is out. All right, so before we move forward, if we look at the implication of this new Sharia standard, what has been mentioned is that if there is a conflict between this new standard and the previous Sharia standard number 2, right, or perhaps any other clauses of other standard, in terms of payment cards, this Sharia standard will prevail. Now, what would happen for regulators and policymakers? They should give a period of not more than 1 year to IFIs within their jurisdiction to comply with the new standard. Since it's a new one, definitely it will take some time, but that some time should not extend beyond 1 year. And what happens to the previous transactions, which were based on the understanding of previous Sharia standard? They will remain in effect until the end of their contractual terms. So if the contractual term ends in a month or 2, for example, after the regulators have issued the policy, and not until the end of the year, then they should terminate that. The contract should be terminated and new contracts shouldn't be issued. New contracts shouldn't be taken. That's basically general implication of this issuance of the new Sharia standard. Now, in this slide, we have highlighted a few differences. If you look at standard number 61, there are some new conditions introduced related to cancellation fees or using the card with different currencies than the currency of the account, or details of granting different privileges to the cardholders, using the card to obtain cash, returning goods and services, or even promoting the credit cards. Those issues in such details were not there in Sharia standard number 2. In Sharia standard number 61, we find a difference in terms of when there is a guarantee. So for example, in standard number 2, when a guarantee is required by the issuer of the card, for example, IFI, the issuer must stipulate that it will be invested based on mudaraba. However, in Sharia standard number 61, the guarantee that is used by the issuer, they can give the depositor either the option to deposit in a current account, which is not based on mudaraba, or an investment account, which can be based on mudaraba, right? In Sharia standard number 2, revolving credit cards is just mentioned as prohibited, because back then, most probably conventional credit cards were the only credit cards. So it's just mentioned as prohibited. But now in 2021, there are several different types of credit cards. How this are categorized under this Sharia standard is that if those are based on loan with interest, those are definitely prohibited. But there are 3 other applications mentioned for revolving credit cards, usually issued by IFIs. So out of them, 2 are allowed based on certain conditions and 1 is not allowed. In terms of charging fees of issuance, renewal, and replacement of cards, in Sharia standard number 2, it doesn't mention any restriction, but in Sharia standard number 61, it mentions that fees for issuance, renewal, and replacement of credit cards must be limited to the direct actual cost. So this direct actual cost is something very significant contribution of this Sharia standard, I would say. Okay, so in terms of the scope of the Sharia standard, it covers all the major cards, especially the debit card, prepaid card, charge card, and credit card. It also includes the applications of payment cards and IFIs. And one thing to note is when the term credit card is mentioned, it refers to both charge cards as well as revolving credit cards, unless it is mentioned otherwise. So if credit cards are mentioned, both would be taken into consideration. Now, when we talk about credit card is a loan by default, right? But if we want to use some other contract together, for example, if a credit card is issued on the basis of qard, a qard is a loan, but we also have, let's say, ijara, which is services, right? Or any other type of contract like tawarruq or murabaha. So this is something we have to take into consideration, this fundamental hadith, which has been narrated by Amr ibn Shu'aib from his father, and that his grandfather said that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, it is not permissible to combine loan and sale or have two conditions in one transaction or to sell what you do not have. لا يحل سلف وبيع ولا شرطان في بيع ولا بيع ما ليس عندك. This is reported by Ibn Asay in his Sunan. So this is one of the few Sharia bases that has been quoted for this Sharia standard. Now, this glossary, we'll come back to this one later on, inshallah. This is related to direct actual cost. And as I mentioned previously, this is one of the significant contributions of this Sharia standard. I will come later on here, inshallah. Okay, this concept checker also will come later on. Okay. Now, this is the part number 2, basically. If you look at the Arabic Sharia standard, the title of this part is أطراف البطاقات وتكييف العلاقات بينها. Basically, the different parties of the payment cards and their relationships. There is a typo in the spelling. I'm sorry for that. So the different relationships. Now, this is important because when we understand the different relationships between the parties, it is easier to give the taqif, Shari'i taqif, like the Sharia implication, understand the Sharia implication of this, the different relationships. So one of the relationship is basically between Musdir al-Bitaqa wa Hamiliha, the issuer of the credit card, issuer of the card and the holder of the card. So the issuer is basically the bank, the financial institution, which is issuing the card. And the holder is the customer, the user of the card, right? So what is the issue, the relationship? Now, there could be few stages of the relationship, and each may have a different type of relationship. The first one is عند إصدار البطاقة, when issuing the card. When it's issuing the card, it's basically a service relationship. It mentions علاقة تقديم خدمات لحاملها تتمثل في إصدار البطاقة واستمرارها صالحة للاستخدام. So it's basically providing some services to the user of the credit of the card when he will be using the card for several different services. So this is just for the issuance. It's a service, the issuance of the service of the issuance provided by the issuer bank or financial institution. When he's using the card, when the user is using the card, and the istikhdam al-bitaqa. Now this is when the relationship is hawala. The holder transfer the recipient to the issuer. So what is hawala? Hawala is basically transfer of debt. So the user, he makes a transaction and he's supposed to make a transaction. So what he owes some money to the payee, to the one he is transferring the funds. So he's basically redirecting or transferring the recipient to the issuer, to the bank. In other words, he's saying, you go to my issuer bank and you collect the money from him. So this is basically hawala or transfer of his responsibility. يحيل فيها حامل البطاقة قابل البطاقة على مصدر البطاقة الذي يدفع فيها رصيد حامل البطاقة لديه. Right? The issuer then either pays from the holder's money or from its money, and then it will be a debt to be recovered from the holder. So in case of debit card, the issuer already has the money of the user, of the customer. So in that case, he will just use his money to pay him. Or in case of a credit card and charge card, then the customer doesn't have money in his account. So in that case, the issuer basically will advance some fund from itself so that he can use, it can be a debt, and that debt basically will be later on recovered from him. All right. When the relationship of that of a guarantee, when an amount of money in the account holder of the holder is frozen to guarantee possible obligations of the holder. So in some cases, the bank or the issuer financial institution may require to submit some funds, deposit some funds, and those funds could be frozen if the obligations are not met. So that would be just a relationship of guarantee. Right? It will be a dhaman, it will be a liability relationship, it will be a relationship of guarantee. In the case when that amount is frozen to basically to take back the obligations of the holder or the issuer. Now between the issuer and the recipient and the recipient's bank, بين بنك التاجر وقابل البطاقة. So between the merchant bank, so merchant's bank and the merchant, right? what is the issuer? What is the relationship? The relationship is basically service relationship. This is not issuer. This is basically between the recipient, in other words, merchant, and his bank. So for example, I'm using the card to pay to a grocery. So the grocery is the recipient, the grocery is the merchant bank. So what is the relationship between him and his bank? Because he will get paid, he will get the money basically from the bank, from the POS he is using. So if we go to the groceries, we will see that they are using some sort of POS where they will either use the contactless option, we'll just put the card there and it will automatically debit our card, or we have to put the PIN, right? So that POS machine is provided by a bank. That's what we are calling about merchant's bank or recipient's bank. Now the relationship between him and that POS issuer bank is a service relationship. They are basically providing a service to capture that fund from the holder, from the payer, and basically pay the merchant. So that's just a ijara. That's a taqdim alaqatu taqdim khidmat. It's providing some sort of services. All right. So what are the services? Firstly, of course, to capture the payment, and then تنظيم تعامله مع نظام البطاقة and والوكالة بالتحصيل. So on behalf of him, collecting the payment from the holder's issuer bank. So the POS is collecting the card money from the issuer's bank, from the holder's issuer's bank. So there are two banks. I hope this is very clear. On one hand, the card holder's bank, which we are calling issuer. On the other hand, the merchant's bank. So the merchant's bank is basically collecting the fund from the holder's bank. So that's ijara, that's a service relationship. Then between sponsor and other parties, it will be a service agreement. So sometimes we will have different international institutions like Visa, MasterCard, Amex, Discovery, etc. So what would be the relationship with those different parties? Usually those are service agreement. These are basically using their channels, using their gateways. So it's outrightly service relationship. Okay. Now different features of different cards under this title of Khasa'is al-Bataqat in clause number 3, it mentions few features. If you recall in Sharia standard number 2, those features are also mentioned. More or less the features are quite same. So in case of debit card, for example, this is a settlement instrument and not a credit instrument. So here basically the depositor would have some funds, and from that fund the funds would be settled when he's using the card, right? And the merchant's bank and the issuer charge a percentage of payments made using the card. So usually the merchant's bank is, again, if I'm paying to the grocery, so the grocery is the merchant. So his bank may charge a fee to the merchant, usually like 2%, 3% or something like that, for using the card. Or the issuer bank could also charge a fee. So this could be different based on different practices. Prepaid card, again, it's also a settlement instrument, not a credit instrument. There is no loan or financing. And prepaid card is a bit similar with debit card as well. The account may be in local currency or other currencies. So prepaid card has some flexibilities to also top up into different currencies. This is, again, the main takeaway from Sharia point of view here is that in both debit card and credit card, it's basically not a credit instrument, it's not a loan. In a charge card, it's a settlement instrument as well as a credit instrument with a fixed ceiling and a fixed initial period. The debts must be settled with a fixed period, otherwise a penalty charge will be imposed by conventional financial institutions, but not IFIs. Whereby for revolving credit cards, in addition to the feature of charge cards, the holder of this card would be also given a period to settle his debt without imposing any interest to him. And he's also given the option to extend the due date for an interest charge. So the credit could revolve. In a charge card, usually that's not there. It's a fixed ceiling and a fixed initial period. But the takeaway from Sharia point of view is that there is some sort of loan in those two types of cards, charge cards and revolving credit cards. Okay, now when it comes to Sharia rulings, right, there is this title in the Sharia standard called Al-Hukm al-Shar'i li Anwa' al-Bitaqat. the Sharia rulings on the different types of cards. So when it comes to debit cards, the Sharia rulings is current account cards should not be exclusively granted discount or waiver of fees. So if it is again the current account, there shouldn't be given any exclusive discount or exclusive waiver of fees. In other words, current account, if you recall in Sharia standards, it is mentioned the current accounts are often loans, right? If those are based on loans and we are giving some sort of discount or waiver of fees just to the current accounts exclusively, then this could be seen as a feature or a benefit against the loan, which is problematic. You can further refer to the Sharia standard on qard or Sharia standard on loan. So this is something to be noted, and its issuance should be conditional upon reaching a certain amount. If the issuer issues it without fees or with fees lower than the actual expense, or if the holder is granted privileges for which the issuer pays. So this is basically the fundamentally few rulings of this debit cards. When it comes to prepaid cards, rulings of currency exchange would apply when the card is used to convert the currency to the account to other currency. So since we mentioned that the prepaid card basically can hold few different types of currencies, so the rule of currency exchange, which is Sharia standard number 1, would also apply here when it comes to the conversion. In terms of charge cards, there should be no interest nor a penalty charge. If it's just a loan, there shouldn't be any interest or penalty charge. If the issuer requires the holder to deposit a certain amount as guarantee, the holder should be given the option to either deposit in a current account or an investment account. This is what we mentioned in the very second slide as one of the differences between the previous Sharia standard and this Sharia standard. In terms of revolving credit cards that charge interest on loans are not allowed. Now we'll see some applications by IFIs for credit cards later on, and there are Sharia rulings as well. So this is basically the overall few Sharia rulings mentioned in this Sharia standard. Now before we proceed to the next few slides, let me go to a very quick concept checker. And please post your answer in chat, and we will reveal the answer shortly, inshallah. You can use the chat box to provide your answer. Which one you think is the correct answer? All right, thank you for your participation. It's a lot of good participation. The keyword here is basically it's a loan extended by the holder to the issuer. Usually that would be debit cards, right? Yeah. Inshallah, we'll go through further. Inshallah, let's finish the rest of the slides. The answer is debit cards. Thank you for your participation. Okay, now few other ahkam. In clause number 5, it mentions some general rulings, ahkam amma. Okay, let's go through those ahkam amma and we'll find some interesting points to note, inshallah. Firstly, first one, fees related to loans in credit cards should not be more than the direct actual cost. As I was mentioning, this is one of the fundamental contribution of this Sharia standard to the previous one. So, okay, so let's read again. The fees related to the loans in credit cards should not be more than direct actual cost. Now, what are the different types of cost, basically, right? Let's go to the glossary that we had in the very beginning. Then it will help us, inshallah, to understand this first. Okay. So this is the glossary. This is the definition mentioned in the AAOIFI Sharia standard itself, under the mulhaq, under the appendix of called التعريفات. ملحق جيم التعريفات. And then there it mentions that التكلفة الفعلية المباشرة, the direct actual cost in payment cards. Now, when the issuer pays to a third party to issue a card, deliver it or execute its process and collects the dues from its holders, such as the fees paid to the card's sponsors, card delivery charges, fees for non-issuer ATM withdrawal, fees for collecting agencies or legal fees. These are direct costs, right? These are all direct costs. If the issuer, the financial institution which is issuing the card, is paying to any third party to issue the card, to deliver it, to execute its process or whatever, those are all direct costs basically for the payment cards. So in other words, they can charge those fees to the holder, to the customer. If such fees are not exclusively related to the cards, then the actual cost in cards shall be calculated based on a fair estimation of proportion of cards compared to the other areas that share the cost. So if the fees that are basically considered as the fees for the cards are not exclusive to these cards, basically these are shared cost between the issuance of those cards and others as well, other services as well. In those cases, a fair estimation needs to be there compared to other areas of the shared cost, so that can be charged as direct actual cost for the issuance of such cards. Now, this is important. The direct actual cost does not include cost of fund, opportunity cost, employee salaries, rentals of places, furniture and transportation, nor any similar general administrative expenses of the issuer. So if there is any such additional cost, which are basically general administrative expenses, salaries, etc., those cannot be attributed proportionately to the debt-based cards, debt-based payment cards like credit cards, charge cards. So this is very important. We see in many financial institutions which issue the credit cards based on cards or based on the concept of loan, they may attribute proportional cost to the cards as well. But here it very explicitly mentions that these will not be considered as direct actual cost. In the event of doubt in determining any expenses, caution must be exercised by taking the lower amount to give a preference to the prevention side, as the card is based on loan. So let's say we are not sure if this can be considered as a direct actual expense or it cannot be considered. So in that case of doubt, which one should we take? We should consider this as doubtful, and we should use the side of prevention. In other words, not basically involving in it and avoiding it, avoiding that, considering that cost under the direct actual cost. Why is it that? We can refer to the Sharia standard on qard or loan. When it's a loan, when it's a qarz, it is one of the most sensitive contracts in Sharia. It shouldn't be attached with any other different types of contracts, etc., which could be a hila, which could be a trick to charge interest. So because the credit cards are usually loans, so in that case, if we attribute cost, even which are suspicious, this could be considered as riba. Hence, the caution should be on that side. In all circumstances, recording profit for issuer based on the collection of direct actual cost is not allowed. So if there is a direct actual cost and the issuer wants to record profit based on this, this is also not allowed. This is what is mentioned. وفي جميع الأحوال لا يجوز أن تسجل أرباح للمصدر من تحصيل هذه التكلفة. So these are what mentioned in the glossary. Now let's go back to where we were. General rulings. Sorry, this one. Okay. Now I hope this is clear. There are different types of fees. One could be not be more than direct actual cost. If it is more than direct actual cost, then it could be considered as riba. Okay. Let me just go through a few other fees it has mentioned in this Sharia standard. I think that would be also helpful. So the first type of fees, there are different types of fees. Okay. The first type of fees that should not be more than the direct actual cost is basically what includes the fees that are related to loans in credit cards, such as issuance and renewal fees, withdrawal fees, raising the credit release ceiling fees, extending due date fees, and currency exchange fees. All those fees should be pegged to direct actual cost. There are second type of fees which can be unrestricted, that are based on mutual agreements, such as fees charged to the recipient. Like credit card holders must not be charged for these fees, like sponsor fees, fees in the cards that don't involve credit card features by the issuer, and fees charged by banks other than the issuer of the for withdrawal from the ATM. So few things are mentioned here. One is which is basically charged not to the recipient, rather some others like sponsor fees, etc. That can be unrestricted. It doesn't need to be restricted because there is no loan relationship with the party other than the recipient. Secondly, if it is like a withdrawal from bank ATM other than the issuer bank, there can also be additional fees, no issue, because the relationship is of the loan relationship is basically with the issuer bank, not the other third party bank. So this could be also unrestricted. There could be higher fees as well. And fees where they don't have this credit relationship, loan relationship, there also can be additional fees. In terms of cancellation fees, if the holder requests cancellation or the issuer cancels it due to a Sharia recognized reason that it attributes to the holder, the issuer may keep all the issuance fees. If the holder requests cancellation and he was charged fees for services that extend throughout the validity period, the issuer may keep the amount of fees proportionate to the period the services were made available until the date of cancellation. So let me repeat again. In terms of cancellation fees, we need to see why we are canceling the card. If our card is cancelled, either because the holder requested it or the issuer cancelled it due to Sharia recognized reason, something that Sharia recognizes it. In that case, we will attribute the cancellation to the holder. So in that case, the issuer has the liberty to hold all the issuance fees, right? But if it was due to something not because of the holder's request, in that case, he may only keep the fees proportionate to the services until the date of cancellation. All right. Now, in terms of joining sponsors, it is allowed if the Sharia violations are eliminated from the agreements, such as there is no interest, no penalty charges. I think we have covered it here as well. Let's read out. So card cancellation fees should be borne by the holder unless the issuer cancels it without a valid reason. We have covered it. Agreement with the sponsors should be free from interest and penalty charges. So international sponsors, like as I mentioned, Visa, MasterCard, etc., or other types of sponsors should be fine as long as it's free from interest and any penalty charges. Currency exchange and paying for gold and silver are allowed using debit cards, prepaid cards, also credit cards. I think this is something different from the earlier Sharia standard as well. Currency exchange service fees should be limited to direct actual cost when it is offered by the issuer. Now, if this is also something critical, if we have multiple currencies in the card and the conversion is also provided by the issuer financial institution. Now, if there is a fee or there is a cost for the conversion, definitely there would be. That should be also something pegged to direct actual cost, so that do not become another way to charge interest. Basically, we are trying to ring fence all the different areas which could be loopholes to charge interest, because this is something very fundamental to Islamic finance. Why we are doing Islamic finance? To come out of riba. It doesn't make any sense that we go back to riba in one way or another. So that's basically the whole point why we have all those general rulings and other rulings as well. Okay, some other general rulings, ahkam amma. It is not allowed to increase fees in consideration for discounts or privileges that are not conditional on the use of the card, or privileges that are not precisely determined. So any such increase of fees is also not allowed. It is not allowed in debt-based cards to charge fees for permissible privileges above the direct actual cost of such privileges as well. Again, so that it doesn't become indirectly a way to charge interest. The issuer may offer to the holder a subscription in an Islamic insurance with fees, whether such arrangement by the issuer is done for free or for fees. There is no issue. It's a separate offering, and for that offering it could be charged or it could be provided for free as well. The holder shall bear the cost of returning goods and services unless the return was due to a defect intentionally hidden by the recipient. Now this is when there is a sale transaction. So the holder of the card, when he wants to return some goods or services, he should be the one who bears the expense for that, unless it is for a defect which was unintentionally hidden by the recipient. It is not allowed to use the card to obtain cash from a recipient that is recorded as a higher debt on the holder in the post service. The issuer should adhere to the principles of transparency and disclosure. So if there is any other cost and everything, this is a general ruling. Usually when it comes to credit cards, there are a lot of different types of costs or charges, usually not so transparent. But when it comes to Islamic finance, one of the primary or fundamental consideration is to be fair with the parties. And one of the way to fairness is to be transparent, is to be, especially when there are charges involved, when there are costs involved between the parties, it all should be very much transparent, not unlike hundreds, tens of pages of terms and conditions where the user would just get lost and he will not read at all. That's not how Islamic finance should be. Islamic finance should be very well and transparent that these are the charges you may incur. So it's very well known within the parties. Okay, this is a fundamental Sharia basis for overall Islamic finance. عن أبي خالد حاكم بن حزام رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم البيعان بالخيار ما لم يتفرقا فإن صدقا وبينا بورك بينهما في بيعهما وإن كتما وكذبا محقت بركة بيعهما. That the Messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم said, both parties in a business transaction have a right to annul it so long as they have not separated. Our key word from this hadith, key area from this hadith is the next part, where Prophet ﷺ saying, if they tell the truth and make everything clear, فَإِن صَدَّقَا وَبَيَّنَا, they tell the truth and they explain, they make everything clear to each other, then they will be blessed in the transaction. بُورِكَ لَهُمَا فِي بَيْعِهِمْ وَإِن كَتَمَا, but if they conceal, if they keep it concealed, and furthermore, na'uzubillah, if they lie, وَكَذَبَ, the blessing on the transaction will be eliminated. مُحِقَتْ بَرَكَةُ بَيْعِهِمَا. We see it is evidence in Al-Quran as well, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, يَمْحَقُ اللَّهُ الرِّبَى وَيُرْبِي الصَّدَقَاتِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroys the blessing of riba and he increases the blessing of sadaqat, including zakat. So in all transactions, in all contracts, this is something that we should practice. فَإِن صَدَّقَا وَبَيَّنَا, to be truthful, to be transparent with the parties, so that there is blessing. This is what we want to achieve. We just not want to be compliant. Rather, we want the blessing as well. What is the ultimate reason for our compliance? To get the blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be rewarding us with, inshallah. All right, now the very last part of this Sharia standard, تطبيقات لبطاقات الائتمان المتجددة في المؤسسات, some of the modern applications of credit card, revolving credit cards in Islamic financial institutions. So the number one is بطاقة القرض الحسن مع الرسوم. The Qard Hasan, credit card of credit card Hasan with fees. In other words, Qard ma'al ujra, Qard and ujra based credit cards, which is very much dominant. So what the summary here is, basically the holder is given a revolving credit account according to a fixed ceiling, and he is allowed to repay the amount in equal monthly installments without charging interest nor imposing a penalty charge. Right? In general, this is the basic principle. Now, issuer. So, if we look at the loan perspective, the loan is given with a fixed ceiling, with a fixed time period, and he can repay the amount. And even if there is delay, he will not be charged penalty or no interest. However, there are fees. The issuer charges fees for services such as issuance, renewal, replacement, cash withdrawal, raising the ceiling, right? Now, fees are for administrative work here, and payment services and settlement services. So all the different types of services that are provided with the card, there is a fee. Now, the Sharia ruling here is basically that it is allowed if the fees associated with it are according to the rulings mentioned previously in clause 511, which is basically that it has to be within the direct actual cost, within the direct actual cost. Yeah, right. So now what is the direct actual cost? We discussed earlier that all the cost or fees that could be directly attributed to the card. For example, something that has been paid to third party, something that has been actually incurred as a cost for delivery or other withdrawal, etc. issuance, those can be attributed. But salaries, office rentals, furniture, etc., those cannot be attributed as direct actual fees. So if this is adhered to, then only this card is allowed. If this is not adhered to, then it is not allowed. Now, in practice, we see a lot of credit cards issued based on this concept of qard plus ujra, where the loan is qard without any interest, but the service charge is basically a back accounting of interest. Now, it shouldn't be the case, right? So usually what happens is, for example, they want to charge, for example, 5% or 10% per annum. Now that is accounted backward and calculated as a lump sum fee per month. In other words, it is far beyond being direct actual fees. So what is the ruling there? According to AAOIFI Sharia standard, it becomes a riba. It becomes a riba, and it has been evidenced in the Sharia standard on qard as well, but here it is even more explicit in the new Sharia standard that it is not allowed. If the fees are not according to this subclause 511, and in the 511, what it discusses, as we mentioned, the direct actual fees, which is also covered in the definition in the glossary part. So this will not be considered allowed. Again, if I want to read that 511, it says رسوم لا يجوز أن تزيد على التكلفة الفعلية المباشرة وهي الرسوم التي يتقاضاها. So that's basically what are the fees that one cannot charge based on beyond direct actual cost. So it lists down all the different costs. I think we already have discussed quite a detail on this one. All right, now if for applications of revolving credit cards, which is basically based on some sort of cover, some sort of guarantees. So the holder here provides a cash cover for the card deposited in the issuer's account, deposited in the financial institution's account. And this cover is either provided from the holder's own funds or through financing by the issuer. Now, in case the cover is obtained by financing, right, then the issuer may deduct from the due installments according to the usage of the card at the issuer's discretion. That's basically kind of feature of it. Now, Sharia ruling, the card needs to fulfill the following conditions. Firstly, the holder must not be obliged to deposit the cover in a current account. And secondly, the agreement must state that the issuer is not obliged to give any discount on due installments. So if those two conditions are fulfilled or taken care of, then this is fine. Otherwise, this is also Sharia-wise problematic according to this AAOIFI Sharia standard. All right, last but not least, this is basically Bitaqat al-Tawarruq al-Lahiq lil-Iqtirat. This is applications of revolving credit cards and IFIs. Initially, it's a qard, and then it's in tawarruq. So what happens? Initially, it's a qard, but on the settlement due date, the holder has the option to either settle the debt or enter into a tawarruq transaction to settle the debt and then repay the tawarruq debt in installments. So the hukm shara'i, the Sharia ruling is that la yajuzu tasmimu bitaqa تقوم على إقراض المصدر الحامل البطاقة بدون فائدة ثم قلب دين القرض بتورق معه لسداد مبلغ القرض يرتب في ذمة حامل البطاقة دينا يزيد على دين القرض. So this is not Sharia wise not allowed. لا يجوز. It explicitly mentions لا يجوز, and in fact it also refers us to the Sharia standard number 59 on sale of debt or bay' al-dain. So if we look at, we haven't actually cross-referred in our slide, but usually that's in that Sharia standard we'll see basically the rulings of bay' al-dain or sale of debt, because what is happening here is basically it becomes a debt and then it is converted to a tawarruq, right, as like a sale of debt, and that has been explicitly mentioned as it is not permissible. So with that, it finishes the Sharia standard. We have basically around 6 sections. Just to recap, we start with the Nassul Mi'yar, or firstly the Nitaqul Mi'yar, the scope of the Sharia standard, then Atraful Bitaqat, the different parties and the relationships in issuance of any card. Then number 3 is basically the Khasais al-Bitaqat, the features of different types of cards, which we discussed. Number 4 is Al-Hukm al-Shari'i, the Sharia rulings of the different types of cards. Number 5 is Ahkam Amma, or general rulings. This is where we discussed what type of fees and cost it can deduct and what type of fees it cannot charge. Then it also discusses many other aspects as well. We try to compress it as much as we can. And finally, it discusses in number 6, تطبيقات لبطاقات الائتمان المتجددة في المؤسسات, the different applications of revolving credit cards in financial institutions. And with that, it finishes the Sharia standard. There are a few other things in this Sharia standard. Is basically the implication, which we mentioned in the very beginning, like how the policymakers would decide on implementing the Sharia standard. It also includes the Mustanadul Ahkam al-Shar'iyya, the Sharia basis, and this Sharia basis is quite organized in terms of the number of clauses, etc., which was not so much so in the previous Sharia standard. And then we have this ta'rifat or glossary, and in the glossary we have only one definition, which is basically defining the direct actual cost. Right, so with that, we will finish the Sharia standard. Before we take up the questions from the chat box and Q&A, there's one last concept checker for you. So you can check the concept checker, and then we'll inshallah move forward to the Q&As. Thank you so much. You can answer, you can put your answer in the chat box, just with the correct option. All right, thank you very much. Yes, all of you are absolutely correct. According to the Sharia standard, all of the cards could be used to basically purchase gold and silver. Right, so with that, we thank you, and inshallah, let's go to the Q&A section. I have few questions here. Badr Ahsan, you want to assist me, or should I just continue with the Q&As?
Yes, sir, please. You may.
Okay, Jazakallah khairan. So there is a question, any definition of direct actual cause is defined, or it will depend upon the relevant AAOIFI authorities? I see the question came quite early in the session. So I hope you already got the answer, that this direct actual cost has been defined. So just to reiterate, there is a separate glossary, just one item, the direct actual cost. It has been defined, التكلفة الفعلية المباشرة, the direct actual cost in the cards, especially التي تقوم على الإقراض, which is debt based, which is loan based. So this is mentioned there. And also in section, in clause 5 under Ahkam Amma, general rulings. So here also in clause subclauses 5.1, the whole subclause 5.1 is about rusumul bitaqat, the fees of the cards. But here in this section, it is basically related to all the different types of fees a holder can be charged on, and even other parties will charge. So this includes almost all types of fees. However, the definition includes the definition of direct actual cost. Okay, next question by Faisal Reza. Is the monthly fees based on membership include in direct actual cost? No, we don't find so. So I would like to go to the glossary again. If you just to show you, yes, if you look at the glossary, these are the basically the direct actual cost is the payment that the issuer pays to third party for the delivery, issuance, execution of the processes, and collecting the dues from its holder, such as etc. Blah, blah, blah. So you can see the monthly membership, monthly fees based on membership is not included. Yeah, thank you. Next question by Mr. Saqib. So the card-based model means the IFI will not be able to charge any profit on the card business. The card business will not be a profitable segment. Is my understanding correct? I think that's a fair conclusion. I will not conclude that way, but I agree to most of it. Rather, I would say it definitely could be a profitable. It just needs to be, the IFI needs to be innovative. As we see, the direct actual cost or charging penalties, etc., are all applicable when the issuer IFI is charging to the holder. What if the issuer IFI is not charging to the holder? Rather, it is charging to the merchant, it is charging to other parties. So there are businesses, right? There are different ways to make this business. The problem is when we are charging the party which we are giving the loan to him. So this is where it becomes problematic. This is where it becomes under the broader umbrella of riba. So that's why all the additional emphasis and cautions here. But if we understand that this is prohibited, we cannot make profit out of it, immediately we will see the whole team is becoming innovative. They will find other ways to make profit out of it. And there are halal, there are limitless, unlimited haram options. Haram is only few, but halal options are many. Al-aslu fil ashya al-ibaha. As we know, the fundamental legal maxim when it comes to Islamic financial jurisprudence is that the ruling is halal, being halal, unless there is a prohibited element. So I hope there would be many other ways. It's just that the industry might not have utilized the whole creative and innovative ideas to make business on this one. All right, thank you for your question again. Last question we see in the Q&A. We'll then go to the chat box, inshallah. Do you see any challenge in the credit cards based upon the tawarruk mode? We see actually, or definitely, we see that AAOIFI in its subclause 3.6, it mentions if basically this card is designed in a way that there would be initially qard, and later on when it comes to settlement date, the debt is converted summa qalbu dain al-qardi bitawarruq ma'ahu, right? It is converted to tawarruq. This model AAOIFI has mentioned it is laijus, this is not permissible. But it doesn't necessarily mean that all different types of tawarruq is considered impermissible. There could be permissible ways as well, but we just have stated what has been mentioned in the AAOIFI standard. All right, Jazakallah khairan. Sorry, brother, the other options are not enough to fill the stomachs of the bank. All right, I have no comments on this. Thank you for your comment. After card charges, what is the accounting treatment? After card charges, what is the accounting treatment? Perhaps if you can come up with a very specific question or like treatment of a specific item, then perhaps I can comment. But I'm not sure which one you are exactly asking, because there could be different types of charges as well. Okay, another question. The card will initially be based upon the model of murabaha, and then the receivables will also be settled through commodity murabaha transaction. I guess this is not what mentioned by AAOIFI in this Sharia standard. However, in this Sharia standard, we only see 3 models being examined. But if it is commodity murabaha, I cannot basically visualize it. There could be ways, but we are just limiting ourselves to this standard in particular, rather than commenting on all the different models that are there in the industry. Thank you again for participation and also asking your question. Regarding the slides, yes, inshallah, we will share the slides. هل رسوم البطاقات مرتبطة بقمة العمليتين التي نجريها عبر هذه البطاقات أم هي ثابتة لا تتغير؟ All right, it should be ثابتة. The direct actual cost should be ثابتة, right? Should be static. Actual cost usually are not something متغير, except for a small تغير, small variations, not much. But I guess what you are asking, if I'm not wrong, is to benchmark it to some indices or some indexes or some metrics based on which the fees will be variable. I think this could be problematic, and this could be considered as a trick to obtain interest, especially when it's a loan-based card. Jazakallah khairan. Let me go to the chat box. Okay, I think there is the type PPT. I don't have any other question, Brother Ahsan. Okay, I find one. Attributing direct cost will result in cost of the bank to run its riba operations being allocated based on some allocation key to the Islamic credit card. Realistically and practically, it is not possible to isolate this cost as their store cost based on the bank is supporting riba instrument. Okay, it's a long comment by M. Jada. Yeah, the dust of riba is still very much evident here. I think maybe I cannot stop myself to just share one observation overall. Like whenever there is a new Sharia standard or new Sharia ruling, of course, it may feel that there is no other way, or that's what the industry operates, and we cannot get our hands out of it. But if we look at the journey since the establishment of Islamic development and further all the different Islamic financial institutions throughout the last few decades, we have progressed a lot. We have made a lot of progress, alhamdulillah. A lot of challenges have been overcome. It just requires our collective deliberation to overcome riba. Once we are aligned on that, inshallah, we will be able to overcome. I firmly believe we have hundreds of thousands of talents, beautiful talents gifted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We just need to click that so that we can come up with some innovative solutions, inshallah. So I will not comment on this particularly, but I understand your concern. Okay, I think there are many other comments regarding the slides. Inshallah, we will share the slides. Inshallah, we will share. All right, I think okay. I received, there are a few other questions. Assalamu alaikum. If the bank providing card is not Sharia compliant, but the account connected card is current account and no fees connected, what would be Sharia alluring in this regard? Okay, if the bank provided card is not Sharia compliant, but the account connected card is current account but no fees connected, what would be Sharia? If the it's a bit confusing, this question, sorry to say, because if the current account is no fees is there, so assuming it's a Sharia compliant, and then the card is not Sharia compliant, how could it then? If the card is not Sharia compliant, then the usage of it would be non-Sharia compliant as well, regardless of the current account. So current account, if there is no fees, no interest, that would remain Sharia compliant, but the card could be Sharia non-compliant. those are two different products. And regardless of either one becomes Sharia compliant or not, both has to be individually Sharia compliant in order for us to individually be able to use it. Okay, and there is any direct cost on debt-based payment? Is there any indirect cost on debt-based payment? What are they and how they are reported? I'm sorry, I cannot think of the different types of indirect costs. Indirect costs could be limitless, like anything and everything could be attributed as a cost, as long as it is not one of the few items mentioned as a direct cost. It is an indirect cost. Now, what are those? It is limitless. People may consider anything and everything as cost. Salaries, office rentals, utilities, everything could be proportionately attributed. So all those are indirect costs, as long as those do not fall under the list of direct actual cost. Thank you, Dr. Amni. Inshallah, we will forward the slides. What do you prefer for credit cards with ujra or tawarruk? I do not prefer anything. I just prefer and hope and make dua sincerely that all of us can come out of riba. That's the only last thing that I can hope. I don't have any preference to any specific modes, and I strongly believe as long as we understand the core prohibitions and why the prohibitions are there in the very first place, we have multitudes of talents to come up with halal solutions, right? I strongly believe that. So if I don't know, I mean, the industry, since the Sharia standard was just issued last year, I hope the industry is yet to get into full grasp of it. This webinar is one of the initiatives to get this rolling. And I hope, inshallah, we will have more and more. And once it is finally translated, the official translation is there, it would be further beneficial, inshallah. But I really hope there are many other halal solutions as well. And of course, not every solution would have a halal alternative. That is also something we need to be mindful of. Okay, Brother Ahsan, I think we are done with the different questions. There are a few hands raised. I leave it to you, how you want to consider that.
Jazakallah, Sheikh. I would ask Mr. Zaya to come online.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm here. I think I see two hands. Sadaqat Khan Sahab has raised the hand. Okay, let me allow him to speak. You can speak. Sadaqat Sahab, you can speak now. Your mic is. Assalamu alaikum, Sadaqat bhai.
Assalamu alaikum, Brother Zia and Brother Mufti Yusuf. I'm Sadaqat. First of all, thank you very much for your great efforts towards arranging and giving us the overview of new Sharia Standard 61 in English, because it is still not available in English. You have arranged. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you Ajr Azim for your efforts. We can do dua for you. My question is that different Sharia structures for credit card products are being used in different banks in different countries, like there are some banks using Muraba, some banks using Salam products, some banks Qard Hasan, etc. etc. In your opinion, which Sharia structure is a perfect and closest to Sharia principle and rules? I would like to hear from you.
Jazakallah khairan, brother. As I mentioned in one of the answers of a previous question by one of the attendees, that I would reserve my comment in this case, basically, because there are many different industry practices and it's just a new Sharia standard, and any comment on this, like which one I prefer, because as I mentioned, every financial institution has their own Shari'ah boards. There are regional Shari'ah boards as well, central Shari'ah boards as well. Definitely a lot of efforts made by the Sharia scholars. May Allah give them proper jaza, Amin, and also the industry practitioners. But the only thing that I would say, that what I would prefer, of course, I would prefer a riba-free card. Now, a riba-free is a journey. Being a riba-free is a journey, is a long journey. We have come across several decades, and inshallah, some more decades to come as well. But it's an ongoing journey. we have to go through this journey collectively. That's what I can say at this on today's webinar. I'm sorry again, I cannot comment on any particular structure because this is a new Sharia standard which explicitly comes up with a few very specific things which have been practiced by the industry for quite some time. And I hope, inshallah, the industry will pick up in the next coming few years, and there will be a change, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan again.
Thank you very much, Sheikh. Just one last. Abdu Kamara, he has raised his hand for long. Abdu Kamara, if you want to ask a question, you can please be brief. You can unmute yourself and ask the question. Are you there? Okay, I think he is not available. Or so, thank you very much, Sheikh. I think this brings this session to an end, and we really appreciate. Thank you very much, Brother Yusuf Sultan, and thank you very much for your team at Adal Advisory, and thank you very much for our dear brother who has been actually translating for us.
Brother Ilyas.
Yeah, Brother Ilyas. Brother Ilyas Hussain is a senior trainer and coordinator at IFA Consultancy. This is also another project of Brother Yusuf Sultan based in Bangladesh. So thank you very much, Brother Ilyas, for your kind support, kind continuous support for this project. And thank you all. I hope you would have enjoyed the session. I would advise you to follow the activities, and inshallah, many more activities are coming. And if you need any advisory or Sharia compliance related activity, we highly recommend Adal Advisory, which is a newly formed, highly energetic team, highly competent, highly energetic team led by our brother Sheikh Yusuf Sultan. We wish him and his team all success, and we highly recommend them for any of the projects that you might have. And inshallah, we'll be continuing working together with Brother Yusuf Sultan and his team and Adal Advisory, and be bringing more and more programs sooner. Some nice and exciting things I don't want to announce now because I'm finalizing the date and the times with the speakers. Some extremely exciting things coming in next 2 weeks. I would like you all to actually follow our notification and our emails. I thank you all once again, and especially Brother Yusuf Sultan and his team, who actually on a very short notice translated the text and prepared this presentation. And for the presentation, you guys don't need to ask us every time. We are actually, every webinar is available on our YouTube channel, and we circulate it always. And all of you will get the certificate as well. So don't ask for whether you will get the presentation or the certificate. Brother Yusuf Sultan, do you want to conclude? I would like you to conclude, please.
Yeah, Jazakumullah khairan. I just wanted to thank Taif, your good self, Brother Ahsan, and Brother Ilyas from IFA Consultancy. We have a shared advisory company in Bangladesh, as Brother Zia was mentioning. So Brother Ilyas is our senior member from IFA Consultancy. And this webinar was brought to you by jointly by Taif and Adal Advisory. As Brother Zia mentioned, Adal Advisory is a comparatively new share advisory setup in Malaysia, and we specialize in fintechs, startups, and other different types of financial products as well. So yeah, let's get connected, and inshallah there would be more exciting webinars and other efforts coming jointly by TAIF and Adil, inshallah, in the near future. So please follow both TAIF and Adil Advisory. Jazakumullah khairan. Jazakumullah khairan for your attendance and kind patience.
Thank you very much. And this brings this session to an end. We thank you all. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our effort. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you. This session is concluded.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.